The Red River ran high and wild on the 23rd of April, 1875, swollen fat with snowmelt from the Rockies, 200 miles west. Brown water the color of old blood churned against the ferry's hemp ropes, slapping the thick oak planks with a rhythm that sounded almost like drumming. Giselle Valentin sat rigid in her father's arms, feeling his heart hammering against her shoulder blade. His breath coming short and fast in a way that had nothing to do with her weight. She was 24 years old and had not felt her legs in 5 years. Scarlet fever had taken the sensation and movement below her waist when she was 19, leaving her dependent on a wheeled chair Otto had built from barrel staves and iron wagon rims. Her arms had grown strong from lifting her own dead weight, her shoulders broad from pulling herself upstairs and across thresholds. She kept her ash-blonde hair in a single practical braid, wore calico dresses she'd modified herself with buttons instead of ties, and had learned to read the subtle shifts in people's faces that told her whether they saw a woman or a burden. Right now, reading her father's face, she saw fear. "Papa, why are we crossing in high water?" Her voice was steady, though her fingers dug into his coat sleeve. "The ferryman said it's dangerous until the runoff slows." Otto Valentin was 47, a bohemian immigrant with the thick shoulders of a carpenter and the lined face of a man who'd buried too many hopes. His accent was still heavy after 15 years in the territories. "We must cross today, Jerushko." Before, his voice caught. "Before it is too late." Too late for what? He didn't answer. His arms shifted under her, and Giselle felt the change in his grip, not the careful cradle he'd used 1,000 times before, but something looser, less committed. Her stomach went cold. "Papa." His eyes met hers for one terrible instant. They were wet with tears, his face twisted with something between anguish and resolve. "Forgive me," he whispered in Czech. "Odpust mi macero." Then he pushed, not gently, not an accident. His hands planted against her ribs and shoved hard, launching her backward off the ferry's edge into empty air. The shock of it, the impossibility of it hit before the understanding. Her father. Her father. The man who'd carried her through fever delirium, who'd built her a chair, who'd sworn to protect her always. The water swallowed her scream. Cold like a fist, closed around her lungs, squeezing all the air out in one brutal rush. The current seized her wool skirt and petticoats, dragging her down with the weight of 20 pounds of soaked fabric. She clawed toward the surface, toward the light rippling 6 feet above, but her paralyzed legs were anchors pulling her into the brown murk. "This is how I die," she thought with strange clarity. "Drowned by my own father in the Red River on a spring morning." Her lungs burned. Water filled her nose, her throat. Darkness crept in from the edges of her vision, like ink spreading on paper. She saw her mother's face, Anna dead 3 years of consumption, and wondered if this was what dying felt like. This slow, cold dimming of the world. Then strong hands locked under her armpits and hauled upward with shocking force. She broke the surface, gasping, choking, and found herself pressed against a man's bare chest in a dugout canoe. The world was chaos spray in her face, the roar of water, someone shouting from the ferry. The man holding her shifted her weight with practiced efficiency, one arm locked across her ribcage, while his free hand grabbed a paddle. Giselle's vision cleared enough to see him, Lakota, perhaps 30 years old, with black hair hanging loose and wet past his shoulders. Copper skin, sheeting water. Dark eyes fierce with concentration. He wore wool trousers traded from settlers and a leather vest, high moccasins. His face was all hard angles and sharper focus. A rifle shot cracked across the water. The bullet hissed past Giselle's ear close enough to feel the heat and punched through the canoe's gunwale, sending splinters flying. She twisted to see the ferry now 50 yards upstream. Otto stood at the rail, one hand outstretched, as if he could pull back what he'd done. Behind him, a man in a black coat, lowered a smoking Henry rifle. The Lakota warrior wrapped his arm tighter across Giselle's chest, pinning her against him as he drove the paddle deep with savage strength. Each stroke sent them farther downstream, away from the ferry, away from her father's betrayal. River water streamed from Giselle's hair into her eyes. She sucked air in ragged gasps, her mind still struggling to process what had happened. Their eyes met his dark brown, hers gray, and something passed between them. Recognition of what he'd witnessed. Knowledge of what it meant. "Hold on," he said in careful English, his accent thick but understandable. "We are not safe yet." Giselle's hands found the canoe's sides and gripped until her knuckles went white. Behind them, men were shouting on the ferry. The warrior paddled hard, muscles bunching under wet skin, steering them toward the western bank, where willows overhung the water in dense green tangles. "Why did you save me?" Giselle managed through chattering teeth. He glanced at her, then back to the water. "Because I saw him push you. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." "I owe myself," he said quietly. "I could not watch you drown and remain the man I wished to be." It was the strangest answer Giselle had ever heard, and somehow the most honest. The canoe nosed into the willows. The warrior shipped the paddle and pulled them deeper into cover branches, closing around them like a curtain. Only when they were completely hidden did he allow himself to breathe hard, chest heaving with effort. Giselle looked down at herself. Her dress was plastered to her skin, torn at the shoulder, where something, a submerged branch, maybe had snagged the fabric. Her legs sprawled useless in the canoe's bottom, pale and senseless as driftwood. She was shaking violently, whether from cold or shock she couldn't tell. The warrior moved with deliberate care, pulling a wool blanket from beneath the seat and wrapping it around her shoulders. His hands were gentle, impersonal. "You are injured." "I can't feel my legs. I haven't been able to for 5 years." The words came out flat, matter-of-fact. "Fever took them, but the rest of me works fine." He nodded, accepting this without pity or false sympathy. "Can you sit upright?" "Yes." He helped her shift position, bracing her back against the canoe's side so she wouldn't topple. Then he reached under the seat again and produced a small leather pouch. From it, he took a piece of dried jerky and handed it to her. "Eat. The body needs fuel after cold water." Giselle took it with numb fingers. "Who are you?" "Akacheta, of the Sikangu Lakota, the burnt thigh people." He paused. "I live alone now on the river. I trap animals for pelts trade at the fort downstream." "Why alone?" His jaw tightened. "That is a longer story. For later, maybe, if we survive today." "Do you think we won't?" Akacheta pulled the canoe deeper into the willows, listening to the sounds from upstream, horses, whinnying men calling to each other, the splash of someone wading into shallows. "The man with the rifle, the one who shot at us. You know him?" "No. I saw him on the ferry, but I don't know his name." "And your father? Why would he do this?" Giselle's throat closed. She forced the words out. "I don't know. I thought he loved me." Akacheta's eyes softened slightly. Love and fear can live in the same heart. Sometimes fear wins. He turned to scan the riverbank. "Can you tell me what is happening, why men would chase us?" So Giselle told him, the words spilling out in a rush. She told him about Copper Gulch, the dying mining town 20 miles upstream. About Clancy Rourke, the Irishman, who owned most of the town's debt and operated outside any law except his own. About Otto's mortgage, $200 borrowed in 1873, now ballooned to $600 with interest. Rourke charged quarterly. About the land that secured it, 12 acres and a timber house. And she told him about 6 days ago, when she'd been on the ferry and witnessed something that changed everything. There was an argument. she said, her voice dropping. Between the old ferryman Hiram Petrie and a man I learned later was called Kells. Petrie was angry about something claimed fraud backdating surveys. He said he wouldn't testify to lies for Rourke. I was sitting in my chair near the bow, sketching, only half listening. Then Kells grabbed him. She closed her eyes, seeing it again. Kells strangled him, right there on the ferry. Petrie fought, but Kells was stronger. There was this sound like wet wood snapping. Then Petrie just collapsed. His pocket watch fell out of his vest during the struggle, skittered across the deck. Kells's hands were covered in blood and black grease from the windlass gears. He picked up the watch without thinking, smeared it all over the glass face before dropping it back by the body. Then he saw me watching. Akacheda's hand moved to the long knife at his belt. He threatened you. My father stepped between us, told Kells I was no threat, that I couldn't even walk, so I couldn't go anywhere, couldn't tell anyone. Kells said I'd better keep quiet for both our sakes. Then he left. Giselle swallowed hard. After he was gone, Papa went back to the body. He picked up the watch, I saw him do it, and hid it in his tool bag. He said it was insurance pajistka in case Rourke came after us. But insurance did not save you, Akasheta said. No. Rourke must have told Papa to kill me, to drown me and make it look like an accident. Her voice cracked. And Papa was so afraid of losing the land, of losing everything, that he did it. He carried me onto the ferry and pushed me into the river. They sat in silence, broken only by water lapping against the canoe and the whisper of willow leaves. Upstream horses splashed through shallows. Men were spreading out, searching. The watch, Akacheta said. With the blood and grease, that is proof of murder. If we had it. But Papa hid it somewhere. Then we need to find it. Akacheta's eyes were calculating. But first, we need to survive the next hours. They will search for us. They will tell a story that I kidnapped you, that I am a savage holding a helpless white woman. It is the story people want to believe. Giselle looked at him, this stranger, who'd risked his life to save hers, who'd shown more honor in 10 minutes than her own father had in 24 years. What do? We move, fast, before they organize a proper hunt. He studied her for a moment. You cannot walk, but can you hold on if I carry you? Giselle's arms were strong from 5 years of bearing her own weight. I can hold on. Then we will travel upriver to my camp. It is 2 miles in a willow thicket where the western bank curves. I have supplies there, food, a rifle, dry clothes. We can plan from there. They'll follow our tracks. Yes. But I know this river, and they do not. We have that advantage. Akacheta unwrapped the blanket from her shoulders and wrung it out, and then folded it into a pad. I am going to carry you on my back. You will wrap your arms around my neck and hold tight. Your legs will drag, but that cannot be helped. Understand? Yes. He turned, presenting his back. Giselle hooked her arms around his neck, locking her hands together at his throat. He reached back and adjusted her weight, then stood smoothly. Her dead legs hung against his thighs, but her upper body was secure. Akacheta stepped out of the canoe into knee-deep water. The current pulled at him, but his stance was solid-rooted. He grabbed the canoe's painter rope and began towing it upstream, walking in the shallows, where willow branches hid them from view on the eastern bank. Giselle pressed her cheek against his shoulder blade, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing, the heat of his body against her cold skin. She could hear his heart beating strong and even. This close, she could smell river water and wood smoke and something else, sage maybe, or sweetgrass. Thank you, she said quietly. Do not thank me yet. We are not safe. I don't care. You saved my life when my own father tried to end it. That deserves thanks." Akacheta was silent for several paces. Then, "Your father is not a bad man. He is a broken man. There is a difference. You don't know him. I know fear. I have seen what it does to people, how it eats them from inside until there is nothing left but the fear itself. Your father was eaten. But the man who raised you, who built you that chair, who loved you, he was real once. Remember that." Giselle didn't trust herself to speak. She tightened her grip on Akacheta's neck and let him carry her upstream through the dappled green light away from the ferry and toward whatever came next. Behind them, the hunt was organizing. Sheriff Abel Burdock's voice carried across the water giving orders. "Spread out, Akacheta's got Otto's girl $50 to whoever brings her back alive." Akacheta's shoulders tensed, but he didn't stop walking. One foot in front of the other, pulling the canoe carrying Giselle, moving steadily toward the doubtful safety of his hidden camp. The sun climbed higher. The river murmured its endless song. And two outcasts began a journey that would end in blood and flood and desperate choices neither of them could yet imagine. Akacheta's camp was exactly as he described, a low willow lean-to, woven tight enough to shed rain, set back from the riverbank, in a thicket so dense you could walk within 10 feet and never see it. Inside the space was small but carefully organized. Furs for sleeping a fire pit lined with river stones, trapping gear hung from willow branches, and a battered Sharps rifle that had seen hard use. He set Giselle down on a bearskin pelt near the cold fire pit. She was still shivering, her wet dress clinging like ice. Akacheta produced a buckskin shirt and wool trousers from his pack. "Put these on. Your dress will take hours to dry and you will freeze." Giselle looked at the clothes and then at him. "I'll need help getting out of the dress." "I will turn away. Tell me what you need me to do." It was awkward, humiliating work. Giselle's fingers were still numb from the cold, fumbling with the buttons down her back. Akacheta had to undo them with his eyes averted, his touch impersonal as a doctor's. Then he draped a blanket around her shoulders and turned completely around while she struggled out of the wet dress and into his shirt. The trousers were impossible. Her legs wouldn't cooperate, wouldn't bend or lift. Finally, Akacheta knelt in front of her, still averting his eyes, and helped maneuver her legs into the pant legs, pulling them up to her waist. The whole process took 15 minutes and left both of them tense with the strange intimacy of it. When she was dressed, Akacheta built a fire with practiced efficiency, striking sparks from flint into a nest of dried grass and willow bark, feeding it twigs and then larger pieces until flames crackled cheerfully. Heat began to fill the lean-to. Giselle stopped shivering. "Your dress," Akacheta said, hanging the sodden calico near the fire. "There is something caught in it. A fish hook, I think." Giselle looked. A rusted hook was embedded deep in the fabric near her hip, tangled with torn threads. "I must have snagged it in the water." Akacheta drew his knife, a long blade, with a bone handle worn smooth from use, and carefully cut the fabric around the hook, freeing it. He tossed the hook into the fire, where it glowed red and died. "You are lucky," he said. "If that hook had caught your skin instead of your dress, it could have pulled you under before I reached you." Giselle looked at the ruined dress, thought about the 1,000 small chances that had aligned to keep her alive, Akacheta being on the river at exactly that moment, seeing the push having a canoe fast enough to reach her, the hook catching fabric instead of flesh. Luck seemed too small a word for it. "Tell me about you," she said. "You said you live alone, that you're exiled. What happened?" Akacheta fed the fire, not meeting her eyes. "It is not a good story. I just watched my father try to murder me. I think I can handle a bad story." He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he began to speak, his voice low and measured. 3 summers ago, my war band planned a raid on a settler wagon train. Our people had been pushed off our hunting grounds. Our buffalo were dying. Our children were hungry. The elders said we must fight back, show strength. I was 29, angry, ready to prove myself a warrior. He paused. The raid happened at dawn. We surrounded the wagons. There were fighting-age men, but also women. Children. 5 children, the youngest, maybe 3 winters old. His hands tightened on the stick he was feeding to the fire. Our leader, a man named Hehaka, said we should kill them all. Leave no witnesses, send a message written in blood. Some of the warriors agreed. I did not. He looked up at Giselle. I said killing children for a war they did not start was not strength, it was cowardice. That real warriors protect the helpless, not slaughter them. What happened? Hehaka called me a coward, said I had gone soft from trading with whites, that I valued white lives over Lakota honor. We fought with words first, then fists, then weapons. I wounded 1 warrior. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. And I killed another. The man I killed was my cousin. We had grown up together, learned to ride together, hunted together. And I killed him to stop him from murdering a child. Giselle felt the weight of it, the impossible choice. The tribe exiled you for that. Some wanted me executed. Others said I should be forgiven. The elders compromised exile. I was told to leave and never return, that I was no longer Sikangu Lakota. He stirred the fire. But what they did not know, what none of the whites who heard the story knew, was that during the fighting, one of the wagons caught fire. The children were trapped inside screaming. While my band argued about whether to let them burn or finish them with bullets, I rode into the flames and pulled those children out. All 5 of them. I saved their lives. His jaw tightened. Some warriors saw this as the final betrayal. But I could not let children burn. So I came here. I trap animals, sell pelts, stay away from people. I thought if I lived quietly, caused no trouble, maybe someday the elders would forgive me. But I think now that will not happen. I think I will die alone. Giselle studied his face, then the hard lines around his mouth, the shadows in his eyes. What you did was brave. You saved children. I killed my own blood to do it. To stop him from doing something monstrous. There's a difference. She echoed his words from earlier. Your cousin was the one who'd been eaten by hate. You stayed human. Akacheta's eyes met hers, and for a moment, something passed between them. Recognition, understanding the bond of 2 people who'd made impossible choices and paid for them in isolation. We should plan, he said, breaking the moment. They will be hunting us. We need to decide what to do. We need that pocket watch, Giselle said. It's the only proof of Kels's murder. Without it, it's just my word against Rourke's, and no one will believe a crippled woman over the man who owns half the town. Where would your father hide it? I don't know. Maybe still on the ferry or at our house. He could have buried it, stashed it anywhere. Giselle pressed her palms against her eyes, thinking. We need to get back to Copper Gulch. Search the ferry, maybe talk to people who aren't in Rourke's pocket. That is dangerous. They will be watching for us. I know. But what choice do we have? We can't run forever. I can't run at all. She looked at him steadily. You could leave me, take your canoe and go downriver, start over somewhere else? I'd understand. Akacheta's face hardened. I did not pull you from the river to abandon you on dry land. We will do this together. Why, you don't know me. This isn't your fight. It became my fight when I chose to save you. And when I saw your father push you, he stopped jaw-working. I know what it is to be betrayed by your own people. I will not do that to you. Giselle felt something twist in her chest, sharp and unexpected. Gratitude, maybe, or the beginning of something deeper. All right, she said. Together. But I need to be useful. I'm tired of being cargo. What do you mean, teach me to shoot? I saw you had a rifle. You must have a pistol, too. Akacheta reached to his belt and produced a .31 caliber Colt pocket revolver, well worn but clean. This, 5 shots. Teach me how to use it. If we're going into danger, I want to be able to defend myself. He looked at her with new calculation. You have never shot a gun. No. Papa hunted, but he never let me handle his rifle. Said I didn't need to learn since I couldn't walk well enough to hunt. Bitterness edged her voice. But I can sit. I can aim. I can pull a trigger. Akacheta considered this. Then he nodded. Yes, you can. He handed her the revolver. Feel the weight. Get used to it. The gun was heavier than she'd expected, cold metal warming slowly in her palm. Akacheta moved behind her, adjusting her grip. 2 hands, like this. Left hand supports the right. Elbows braced, you can use your ribs. The compression will steady your arms. His hands guided hers, impersonal but firm. Now, sight down the barrel. See the notch at the back, the post at the front, line them up with your target. He set up a piece of bark against a log 20 feet away. That is your target. Breathe in, let half out, hold, squeeze the trigger, do not jerk it. Giselle did as he instructed. The revolver kicked hard, the shot loud enough to make her ears ring. The bullet went wide, chipping a tree trunk 5 feet left of the target. Again, aim lower. The kick will lift the barrel. She fired again, closer, but still wide. Again. On the 5th shot, she hit the bark dead center, sending splinters flying. Good, Akacheta said. There was approval in his voice. You learn quickly. Giselle lowered the gun, her arms trembling slightly from the unfamiliar effort. But she felt something she hadn't felt in days, capable, in control. We should rest, Akacheta said. Build our strength. They will search through the day, but at night they will make camp. That is when we move. Where are we going? Back to Copper Gulch. There are people there who do not love Rourke. A doctor, maybe someone who might help us. Giselle thought. Dr. Marion Pike. She's a widow, runs the only surgery in town. She treated me after the fever, never made me feel like a burden. And she has no love for Rourke. He tried to foreclose on her surgery last year over some trumped-up debt, but she fought him in court and won. Good. We will go to her after dark. For now, sleep. Giselle lay back on the furs, exhaustion, pulling at her like a current. Akacheta sat by the fire rifle across his knees, watching the forest with the stillness of a man who'd learned that survival meant constant vigilance. As Giselle's eyes drifted closed, she heard him speak quietly, almost to himself. I will not let them take you. I swear this. She didn't know if he meant it for her to hear. But she heard it, and something in her chest, cold and tight, since her father's hands pushed her into death, loosened just slightly. She slept. The hunt found them 2 hours later. Giselle woke to Akacheta's hand, clamped over her mouth, his eyes urgent. He removed his hand and pressed a finger to his lips. She heard it then, horses splashing through the river, men calling to each other, the jingle of bit and bridle. They are close, Akacheta breathed. We must move now. He doused the fire with river water, grabbed his essential gear rifle, powder horn, shot pouch, the packet of cornmeal and jerky, and abandoned everything else. Then he crouched in front of Giselle. I am going to build something to carry you. It will be faster than carrying you on my back." He worked with frantic speed, cutting willow withes and lashing them together with leather cord into a rough travois frame. He stretched a piece of hide across it and attached leather loops at the front. The device looked crude, but when he placed Giselle on it, it held her weight. "This will drag behind the canoe. If we capsize, cut the ropes with this." He pressed his knife into her hands. "Do not let yourself be pulled under." "I won't slow you down deliberately," Giselle said. "If they get too close, you cut me loose and paddle hard." Akacheta's face hardened. "No." "Akacheta." I said no. "We live together or die together. Those are the only choices." He grabbed the travois loops and began dragging her toward the river. "Now hold on." He pulled her into the shallows and tied the travois to the canoe's stern. The arrangement was awkward. The travois floated when the water deepened, but the drag slowed them down. Akacheta had to paddle harder to make any progress. Voices shouted from the bank upstream. "There in the willows I see smoke." A rifle cracked. The bullet tore through willow branches 10 feet to their left. Giselle flinched. Akacheta drove the paddle, deep muscles bunching in his shoulders as he propelled them forward. "They've seen us." A young voice, probably Morrow Rourke's nervous Kansas errand boy. More shots. One punched through the canoe's side, letting in a thin stream of water. Another splintered the paddle in Akacheta's hands, nearly tearing it from his grip. He adjusted his hold on the damaged paddle and kept driving forward. Giselle twisted to look back. She could see them now, Sheriff Burdock's bulk on a gray horse, and beside him, the man she now knew, was Kell's rifle raised. 7 or 8 other riders spread along the bank, firing as they rode. "Akacheta!" Burdock's voice boomed across the water. "You're making this worse. Let the girl go and we'll talk." "He's lying." Giselle shouted back, her voice raw. "My father tried to drown me on Rourke's orders. Akacheta saved my life." "Otto says you were kidnapped." "Burdock called. Says the Indian grabbed you off the ferry." "Otto is a liar and a coward." Giselle's voice cracked with fury. "I watched Kell's murder Hiram Petrie 6 days ago. They're killing me to silence me." More shots. The posse wasn't interested in testimony. Akacheta steered them downstream using the current's speed, but the riders kept pace on the bank. They were being herded, Giselle realized. Pushed toward something. The snag field. Akacheta said, his voice grim. "They are driving us into it. We will be trapped." Giselle knew the snag field. Every Copper Gulch child was warned about it. 2 winters ago, a massive cottonwood had fallen across the river, creating a logjam that had grown as other trees and debris piled against it. The tangle was a maze of submerged logs and whirlpools that could pin a boat or suck a swimmer under in seconds. Boats had to portage around it or risk being smashed to kindling. "Can you navigate it?" she asked. "Alone, maybe. With you?" He shook his head. "It is very dangerous." A bullet answered her, clipping the paddle again and sending splinters flying. Akacheta swore, and Lakota adjusted his hold on the damaged shaft and made a decision. "Hold tight. We are going through." The entrance to the snag field loomed ahead, a chaos of brown logs and white water. Akacheta aimed for a gap between 2 submerged trunks, barely wider than the canoe. They shot through with inches to spare bark scraping both sides, with a screech like nails on slate. Immediately, the current spun them sideways. Akacheta jammed the paddle in deep, using it like a rudder. The travois swung wide on its tether, slamming into a log with a sickening crack that echoed across the water. Giselle felt the impact jar through her hips, no pain. But the vibration was violent enough to rattle her teeth and nearly flip her off the platform. Ahead, The channel forked around a massive root ball, studded with broken branches like spears. Water boiled around it, showing white foam and dark eddies. Akacheta's eyes tracked the surface, reading the current's subtle tells, the slick, smooth patches that meant deep channels, the ripples that marked hidden obstacles. He chose left and drove them into a narrow channel barely 3 feet wide. Gunfire continued from the bank, but the shooters were blocked now by the logjam itself. The bullets came less frequently, more desperate, some ricocheting off logs with high-pitched whines. The channel narrowed further. Willow branches dragged across Giselle's face, tearing at her borrowed shirt, scratching her cheeks. The travois bottomed out on hidden stones, scraping and bucking. She clung to its sides, her upper body jarring with every impact, while her legs flopped uselessly. A submerged log caught the travois's edge, flipping it partially vertical. Giselle screamed, clinging to the frame as the water poured over her. Akacheta back-paddled frantically, and the travois slammed back down, water streaming from the hide platform. They reached a point where the channel was blocked completely by a fallen cottonwood lying diagonal across the current. Akacheta back-paddled hard, trying to stop their momentum, but the current had them. They were going to ram. "Brace," he shouted. The canoe hit the log bow first. The impact threw Akacheta forward against the thwarts with a grunt of pain. The travois flipped completely, dumping Giselle into the water. Cold closed over her head. Current tumbled her like a rag doll, spinning her until she lost all sense of up or down. Her legs tangled in the leather ropes connecting her to the canoe. She clawed for the surface, broke into air, sucked in a desperate breath. River water and air mixed, making her choke before going under again. The rope around her legs pulled tight, dragging her sideways. She was going to drown, tethered to the canoe like an anchor. Panic flared hot in her chest. She fumbled for Akacheta's knife still tucked in her belt and sawed desperately at the rope underwater. Strong hands found her arms. Akacheta hauled her up, braced her against his chest. They were in a pool behind the log, the current calmer here, swirling in lazy eddies. The canoe had washed into it sideways somehow, still floating despite the collision. The travois was intact, but the ropes were cut. Giselle had freed herself. "Are you hurt?" Akacheta gasped. "No, just..." She coughed up river water. "Just scared." "Good. Fear keeps you alive." He looked around quickly. "We cannot stay here. The posse will find a way through." Behind them, voices shouted from beyond the logjam. The sound of horses crashing through brush, men cursing as they tried to navigate the maze on horseback. Akacheta positioned Giselle on his back, her arms locked around his neck, and began wading through the pool toward a gravel bar she could see 20 yards ahead. His breathing was labored now, harsh gasps that told her he was reaching his limits. But he didn't stop, didn't complain. They reached the gravel bar and collapsed together, both gasping. They'd made it through the snag field alive, but they'd lost the travois, and Akacheta was clearly exhausted. His arms trembled when he tried to push himself up. "How far can you carry me?" Giselle asked quietly, dreading the answer. "As far as needed." "That's not an answer. You're human, not a mule. You'll wear out." Akacheta looked at her, water streaming from his hair, and she saw the stubborn determination in his eyes. "Then I wear out. But not yet." Giselle heard it in his voice, the refusal to quit, the bone-deep stubbornness that matched her own. 5 years ago, when the fever took her legs, doctors had said she'd be bedridden for life. She'd proven them wrong through sheer bloody-minded will. This man had the same quality. "All right," she said. "Then we keep moving." "Where?" Akacheta scanned the terrain. "There, the old ore mill. It is on this side of the river, a quarter-mile downstream. Stone walls defensible. We can rest there, plan our next move. They'll find us eventually." "Yes." But maybe by then, I will have thought of something clever. Despite his exhaustion, there was a glint of dark humor in his eyes. Despite everything, Giselle almost smiled. Has anyone ever told you that you're stubborn? Many times. Usually right before they exile me. He stood with visible effort, lifted her onto his back again, and started walking downstream through the shallows. The sun was past its zenith, now angling toward late afternoon. They'd been running for hours. Giselle could feel the tremor of exhaustion in Akacheta's legs and the slight hitch in his stride, the way his breathing had gone ragged. But he didn't complain, didn't slow. One foot in front of the other, carrying her toward the doubtful shelter of an abandoned mill. Behind them, the sound of the hunt continued, horses splashing, men cursing as they navigated the Snagfield's treacherous channels. But the sounds were growing more distant. They'd gained a precious margin of time. Giselle pressed her cheek against Akacheta's shoulder, feeling his heartbeat strong despite his exhaustion. She thought about trust, about how strange it was that she felt safer with this exiled Lakota warrior she'd known for hours than she'd felt in years with her own father. "Thank you," she said softly, "for not giving up on me." Akacheta didn't respond, just adjusted her weight with hands that shook slightly, and kept walking through the cold river water toward the mill's dark silhouette rising against the bluffs. The ore mill had been abandoned for 3 years, a victim of Copper Gulch's decline. It was a 3-story skeleton of timber and stone, its great water wheel motionless and rotting windows empty as skull sockets. The ground floor was open to the elements, filled with massive ore-crushing machinery that was slowly rusting into ruin. Akacheta carried Giselle up a collapsed tailings ramp and into the mill's shadowed interior. The air smelled of rust, mold, and old mineral dust. Pigeon droppings carpeted everything. But the stone walls were thick, and the upper floors offered a view of the approaches, and there was only one main entrance to defend. He set Giselle down behind a fallen ore cart, positioning her where she could brace her back against the wall. Then he checked his weapons. The sharps was dry, the powder horn intact, but they'd lost ammunition in the river. He had perhaps 25 rounds for the rifle, now maybe 10 for the revolver. Against 7 or 8 men with repeating rifles, those numbers weren't good. "We have maybe an hour before they find us." Akacheta said, his voice hoarse. "We should use it to rest." Giselle was shivering again, soaked through for the second time that day. Akacheta found a relatively dry pile of old burlap sacks and draped them over her shoulders, then built a tiny fire using dry splinters from broken crates and a precious match from his waterproof tin. It was barely enough to warm their hands, but it was better than nothing. They sat close to the small flames, saying nothing for long minutes, conserving energy. Giselle could see the exhaustion etched deep in Akacheta's face. Now the lines around his eyes, the tightness in his jaw, the way his hands trembled slightly when he reached for more kindling. He'd been carrying her for miles, paddling against current, navigating deadly rapids. He was approaching human limits. "When they come," Giselle said quietly, "you need to conserve your strength. Don't try to hold them off alone." "What do you suggest?" "Give me the revolver. Position me at a window upstairs where I can see the approaches. I can shoot well enough to make them keep their heads down. You use the rifle for the longer shots." She met his eyes. "We worked together, like you said." Akacheta considered this, then slowly nodded. "You are willing to shoot at men, maybe kill them. They've been shooting at us all day. They killed Hiram Petrie. They forced my father to try to drown me." Giselle's voice was steady, harder than she'd ever heard it. "Yes, I'm willing. They made their choices. I'm making mine." Something in Akacheta's expression changed, respect maybe, or recognition of kinship. "Then we will fight together. But if it goes badly, if they breach the building, you must promise me something." "What?" "Save the last bullet for yourself. Do not let them take you alive." His voice was flat, pragmatic, brutal in its honesty. "What Rourke's men will do to you if they capture you, especially Kells, it is better to die quickly. Do you understand?" Giselle's stomach turned, but she understood what he meant. A paralyzed woman at the mercy of men like Kells. She'd rather die. "I understand. I promise." They spent the next half hour preparing. Akacheta helped Giselle climb the stairs to the second floor, hauling her up step by step, her arms doing most of the work, while he steadied her and positioned her at a window that overlooked the approach from downstream. He placed the revolver in her hands, set the powder flask and bullets beside her. 5 shots, then reload. Make them count. Do not fire unless you have a clear target and you are sure of hitting it." "I understand." Akacheta moved to another window, 15 feet away, the Sharp's rifle ready. From this vantage, they could see a long stretch of riverbank and the trail that led from the snag field. Anyone approaching would be exposed for at least 30 seconds before reaching the mill's walls. They didn't wait long. Horses appeared on the trail, 7 riders in a loose group. Giselle recognized Burdock's bulk in the lead, Kells's lean frame beside him. The others were townsmen she knew by sight, but not name. Men who do violence for pay and whiskey. The group halted 50 yards from the mill. They'd spotted the thin thread of smoke from Akacheta's fire, knew their quarry was inside. There was a conference hands, gesturing, heads turning. Then Burdock nudged his horse forward a few paces. "Akacheta, Giselle, there's no way out of there. Come out now and nobody else gets hurt." "He is lying," Akacheta said quietly from his window. "I know." Giselle raised her voice, putting all her fury into it. "We're not coming out, Burdock. Not until you arrest Kells for murdering Hiram Petrie. Petrie died in an accident. He fell and hit his head on the ferry windlass. That's a damned lie, and you know it." Giselle's voice rang with righteous anger. "I watched Kells strangle him with my own eyes, and then Rourke ordered my father to drown me because I was a witness." There was a pause. Giselle saw Burdock's head turn toward Kells, saw something pass between them. For a moment, she thought she saw doubt flicker across the sheriff's face, recognition that maybe, just maybe, the story he'd been told was false. But then Kells spoke, his voice cold and caring. The cripple's hysterical sheriff, seeing things, were wasting time and daylight. Burdock's face hardened, doubt crushed under the weight of $50 and complicity. "Last chance, come out, or we come in and drag you out." Akacheta's response was to raise the Sharps and fire a single shot that kicked up dirt 3 feet in front of Burdock's horse. The animal reared, nearly throwing the sheriff. "That is your answer." Akacheta called, his voice carrying the finality of a door slamming. "Come if you want, but it will cost you blood." Kells raised his rifle and fired without hesitation. The bullet smashed through the window frame 6 inches from Giselle's head, sending splinters flying. She flinched hard, then forced herself to steady, to breathe, to remember Akacheta's teaching. The siege began. The posse spread out, taking cover behind boulders and scrub. They fired in ragged volleys, trying to keep Akacheta and Giselle pinned down. Most shots went wide. They were firing uphill at small windows from 50 yards, not easy even for experienced shooters. But there were 7 of them, and only 2 defenders, and they had ammunition to spare. Akacheta fired only when he had clear targets. His first shot took a man in the shoulder, spinning him back behind cover with a scream. His second clipped Kells's rifle stock, forcing the gunman to drop the weapon and dive for cover, cursing viciously. Giselle weighted the revolver, heavy in her hands. The range was too far for accurate pistol work. She tracked targets, but held her fire patient, waiting for the right moment. Then she saw movement at the mill's edge. Two men she recognized, one as Morrow, the other as a scarred miner named Parsons, were circling left, trying to reach the building's blind side, where there were no second-floor windows. Giselle tracked them waiting. They broke from cover running low and fast across 20 feet of open ground. She aimed carefully, breathed, like Akacheta had taught her, squeezed. Her first shot went wide. The range was at the edge of her skill. But her second shot hit Morrow in the thigh. He went down screaming, clutching his leg. Parsons froze, staring at his wounded companion, then scrambled back to cover, dragging Morrow with him. Akacheta glanced at her, something like pride flashing in his eyes. Very good shooting. The siege settled into a brutal rhythm. The posse would fire to pin them down, then try to advance. Akacheta's rifle would drive them back. Giselle covered the angles Akacheta couldn't see from his position. Slowly, painfully, they held the mill. But ammunition was finite, and time was against them. Akacheta was down to perhaps 15 rounds for the sharps, now maybe 8 for the revolver. Against 7 determined men with repeating rifles and no time pressure, those numbers weren't sustainable. An hour passed with agonizing slowness. The sun sank lower, painting the mill's interior in shades of rust and gold. Giselle's arms ached from holding the revolver's weight, her shoulders burning with fatigue. Her throat was parched, her lips cracked. Beside her window, Akacheta looked gray with exhaustion, his movements becoming mechanical. Then Giselle heard it, a new sound beneath the gunfire. Water. Rushing water growing louder by the second. She looked toward the mill's rear wall, where the old sluice gates controlled water flow from the mill pond. The storm 2 nights ago had filled the pond to overflowing, and now someone was working the gate mechanism. She could hear the screech of rusted metal, the groan of ancient timbers. Akacheta. They're opening the sluice gates. They're going to flood us out. He turned, saw water beginning to seep under the mill's back door, spreading across the ground floor in a dark stain that grew wider even as they watched. Damn. Smart. He moved toward the stairs. We need to stop them or we will drown like rats. It's suicide to go down there. They'll shoot you the moment you step outside. If we stay here, we drown. If we go down, maybe we die fighting. Those are the only choices. Akacheta's face was set, resolved. I will go. You stay here, cover me from the window. No. Giselle pulled herself toward the stairs, began lowering herself down, step by step, using her arms. We do this together. Remember, Giselle. No argument. You can't do this alone. You need someone to shoot while you move. Now help me down before we're both underwater. Akacheta's jaw worked, and then he nodded sharply. He descended ahead of her, then lifted her and carried her down the remaining stairs to the ground floor. Water was ankle-deep now, and rising fast, cold as death. Through gaps in the rear door, Giselle could see a figure at the sluice lever kells working the mechanism with both hands, his face twisted with effort. When I open the door, Akacheta said, setting Giselle down and bracing her against a support pillar. You shoot him. Can you do that from here? Gashkanen. Giselle raised the revolver, checked the load, 3 rounds left. The range was maybe 10 feet. Even with her limited experience, she could hit a man-sized target at 10 feet. Yes, I can do it. Good. Akacheta grabbed the iron ore cart they'd used as a barricade earlier and positioned himself to shove it aside. His eyes met hers. On 3, 1, 2, 3. He heaved. The cart rolled aside with a screech of metal on stone. The door burst open under the pressure of water behind it. And Kells stood there in the failing light hands, still on the sluice lever, his face registering shock as he saw them. Time seemed to slow. Giselle raised the revolver with both hands, sighted down the barrel, the way Akacheta had taught her just hours ago, hours that felt like years. Kells's hand dropped toward his belt gun. Giselle fired. The bullet took Kells high in the chest, just left of center. The impact slammed him backward against the lever. His eyes went wide-mouth, opening in shock. Blood bloomed on his shirt, dark and spreading. He tried to speak, couldn't. His legs buckled. As he fell, his full weight came down on the sluice lever, driving it all the way to the open position with a final metallic clang. The sluice gates burst. It wasn't a trickle or even a flood. It was a wall of water, a solid mass of liquid force that exploded from the mill pond with the sound of breaking thunder. Thousands of gallons unleashed in a single catastrophic wave. It roared through the mill's ground floor like a living thing, sweeping everything before it. Kells's body barrels, broken machinery, pigeon droppings, all of it caught in the brown torrent. Akacheta lunged for Giselle, grabbed her, and fought toward the stairs as water climbed from ankle-deep to waist-height in the span of seconds. The current was vicious, swirling with debris, trying to tear them apart. Akacheta's feet slipped on the suddenly submerged floor. He went to one knee, kept his grip on Giselle, with desperate strength, hauled himself upright. They reached the stairs. Akacheta climbed with Giselle in his arms, the water chasing them, rising impossibly fast. They made it to the second-floor landing just as the ground floor filled completely brown water, churning just inches below their feet. But the flood hadn't stopped at the mill's walls. Through the window, Giselle watched in horrified fascination as the torrent poured from the broken sluice gates, a brown wave that swept across the yard where the posse had taken cover. Men screamed. Horses reared and broke their tethers, fleeing in wild-eyed panic. 2 men caught in the open were swept off their feet, instantly tumbling in the current like rag dolls. One managed to grab a boulder and cling there, coughing up water. The other, the scarred miner Parsons, vanished under the flood and didn't resurface. Burdock clung desperately to a tree trunk as water swirled around his chest, his face contorted with pure terror. Morrow, wounded leg, and all had somehow climbed onto a tall boulder and was screaming for help, his voice high and broken. Then another figure appeared in the mill's doorway, wading through the flood from outside with grim determination. Otto Valentin, soaked to the skin, wild-eyed, carrying an old cap-and-ball revolver that looked ancient enough to be from the Mexican War. Giselle's breath stopped in her chest. Her father. Here. Now. In the middle of this chaos. "Rourke!" Otto's voice cracked across the water, thick with his Czech accent, and something else, rage maybe, or desperation. "Where is Rourke? I know you are here." From behind a boulder upstream, partially sheltered from the worst of the flood, Clancy Rourke stepped into view. He was a big man, 6 feet and heavily built, with a white beard stained yellow from tobacco and eyes that had never learned mercy. Water swirled around his waist, but he stood solid, unmoved. He held a Colt Navy revolver hammer already cocked. "I'm here, Otto." Rourke said, his Irish brogue thick and mocking. "What do you want? Come to finish the job you botched? Come to drown your daughter properly this time?" "I came to tell you to go to hell." Otto's voice shook but held firm. "You made me try to kill my own daughter, my Tsarushko. You promised to forgive the debt if I did it. And when I failed, when she survived, you hunted her like an animal. You sent your men to murder her." His voice rose. "You are evil, Rourke. Pure evil. And I will not let you win." Rourke laughed, a harsh, ugly sound that carried across the flood. "Evil? I'm a businessman, Otto. You borrowed money you couldn't repay. You signed the papers in front of witnesses. That debt is legal and binding, and I'll take your land one way or another. Your daughter's death was just efficiency. No." Otto reached into his coat with his free hand, movements awkward in the waist-deep water. He pulled out something wrapped in oilcloth and held it high. "You will take nothing. Because I have this." He unwrapped the oilcloth with shaking hands. Inside was a silver pocket watch, its glass face distinctively smeared with a dark brown stain. Blood mixed with black windlass grease, dried, but still visible even from a distance. Hiram Petrie's watch. The proof. This proves Kells murdered Petrie. Otto said, his voice steadying now with purpose. I hid it on the ferry under the windlass housing right where Kells dropped it after he strangled the old man with greasy hands. I went back yesterday and got it. I have been carrying it since, waiting for the right moment to use it. His eyes found Giselle in the second-floor window. I kept it to protect my daughter, to give her a weapon against you. Rourke's face darkened with fury. Give me that, you bohemian fool, or you'll what kill me. I'm already dead, Rourke. Dead inside. I killed myself when I pushed my daughter into the river. Otto's voice broke. But maybe I can fix this. Maybe I can give Giselle what she needs to destroy you. Maybe my death can mean something. Papa! Giselle screamed from the window, her voice raw. Get back, please, just get back. But her warning came too late. Sheriff Burdock, still clinging to his tree trunk with one arm, drew his own revolver with his free hand and aimed at Otto's back. Drop the watch, Otto. You're under arrest for obstruction. Otto spun, saw Burdock's gun, saw Rourke's gun, and understood he was caught between two armed men with nowhere to run in the waist-deep water. His face went through a series of expressions in rapid succession: fear, resignation, and finally something that might have been relief. He looked up at the mill's second floor, found Giselle in the window. Their eyes met across the distance. I am sorry, Cherushko, he called, his voice carrying clearly. For everything, for being weak, for breaking my promise to protect you. I was a coward. His voice strengthened. But your mother was not. Your mother was strong and smart. She protected you even after death. Look for the deed, Giselle. The dowry deed. It will save you. Papa, no, please. But Otto had already turned back to Rourke. He tucked the watch back into its oilcloth with one hand, keeping his revolver raised with the other. This watch goes to the territorial marshal, he said. Along with my testimony. You are finished, Rourke. Then Otto charged through the water. 3 guns fired almost simultaneously, Otto's, Rourke's, Burdock's. The reports were deafening, echoing off the mill's stone walls, overlapping into a single prolonged crack of thunder. Otto's bullet hit Rourke in the shoulder, spinning him sideways with a spray of blood. Rourke's bullet caught Otto square in the chest, punching through his heart. Burdock's bullet went wild, hitting nothing but water. Otto staggered forward on sheer momentum, his legs still driving even as death took him. He crashed into Rourke with all his fading strength, both hands, one still holding the watch in its oilcloth, the other locked around Rourke's coat collar, refusing to release, even as his life bled out. Both men toppled into the flood. The current had them instantly relentless and powerful, sweeping them toward the broken sluice gates, where water still poured from the mill pond in a violent cascade. They tumbled together, Otto's hand death-locked on Rourke's collar. Both men carried inexorably toward the maelstrom. No. Rourke's voice for the first time showing fear. No, damn you, let go. But Otto didn't let go. Couldn't let go. Dead fingers don't release. They reached the sluice gates. The water sucked them under with terrible finality. For one brief moment, Giselle saw her father's face above the surface, eyes, closed mouth, slack, looking almost peaceful. Then he was gone. Neither man surfaced. Giselle couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what she'd just witnessed. Her father, her lying, cowardly, broken father, had just died to stop the man who'd corrupted him, had given his life to deliver the evidence that would free her, had chosen redemption at the cost of everything. She wanted to scream, wanted to weep. But shock held her frozen, staring at the churning water where her father had vanished, one hand pressed against the window frame so hard her knuckles went white. Akacheda's hand closed over hers. "I am sorry," he said quietly, and the gentle compassion in his voice finally broke through the shock. Giselle turned into him, buried her face against his chest, and shook with silent sobs she couldn't release. Akacheda's arms came around her, holding her, while she processed grief too big for tears. Below in the flooded yard, the surviving posse members were climbing from the water, soaked and shaken, and wanting no more part of this disaster. Morrow abandoned his boulder and limped away downstream, not looking back. 2 others followed him, their weapons left behind in the mud. Burdock stood in waist-deep water, staring at the sluice gates where Rourke and Otto had disappeared. His face was gray-slack with shock. Slowly, mechanically, he reached up and unpinned the sheriff's badge from his soaked vest. He held it for a moment, looking at the tarnished metal, then let it drop into the water. He looked up at the mill, found Giselle and Akacheta in the window. "It's done." He called, his voice hollow and defeated. "Rourke's dead. Otto's dead. I'll testify to everything, the murders, the fraud, the forced drowning, all of it. I'll hang for my part in it, but I'll tell the truth. I swear it." He waded toward the shore, a broken man seeking whatever justice waited in Dry Fork. The other posse members dispersed, walking or riding away, without looking back, wanting only distance from this catastrophe. Within minutes, the yard was empty, except for debris and the slowly receding water. Giselle and Akacheta stood at the window, watching the flood subside, watching the sun sink toward the bluffs, watching the world settle into a new and terrible shape, built on sacrifice and blood. "Your father chose right at the end," Akacheta said quietly. "That matters. It does not erase what he did, but it matters." Giselle nodded, unable to speak, past the grief lodged in her throat like a stone. "He spoke of a deed." Akacheta continued. "A dowry deed. Do you know what he meant? No. But we'll find out." Giselle's voice was rough, but steady. "We'll find out what he was trying to tell me. And we'll make sure his death and Petrie's death and Boone's death, all of it, means something." Akacheta's arm tightened around her shoulders. "Yes, we will do this together." They stood together as twilight deepened into night, 2 survivors, planning the next steps of a journey that had cost so much already and wasn't finished yet. The aftermath unfolded with the grinding inevitability of justice, delayed but not denied. Thomas Red, the schoolteacher, arrived at the mill 2 hours after the siege ended. He'd followed the posse from town, staying hidden in the tree line, and had witnessed the final confrontation. He rode immediately to Dry Fork, 20 miles east, and returned with a territorial marshal, a lean man named Jacob Cobb, who wore his authority like a well-worn coat and his skepticism like armor. Marshal Cobb listened to testimonies with the careful attention of someone building a case that would stand in court. He took notes in a leather-bound book, asked pointed questions, didn't accept vague answers. Giselle testified, first describing Petrie's murder in exhaustive detail. The argument about claim fraud, the strangling, the distinctive blood and grease smear Kells's hands left on the watch. She explained how Otto had hidden the watch, how Rourke had forced him to attempt drowning her, how everything had spiraled from that first murder. Akacheta testified to witnessing Otto push Giselle from the ferry to the rescue, to the pursuit and siege. His account was precise, chronological, leaving no room for doubt about who had hunted whom. Thomas Red testified to Rourke's pattern of threats against townspeople, to Burdock's complicity, to the climate of fear that had allowed one man to control an entire community through debt and violence. And Sheriff Abel Burdock, held under guard in a makeshift cell in the mill, gave a written confession that detailed 2 years of corruption in meticulous, damning detail. How Rourke had paid him to look the other way on fraud, intimidation, and violence. How Rourke had ordered Petrie killed for refusing to testify to false land surveys. How Rourke had forced Otto to drown Giselle by threatening immediate foreclosure and destitution. How Burdock had known it was all wrong, but had taken the money anyway, because he was weak and whiskey didn't buy itself. The pocket watch was recovered from the mill pond the next morning, still wrapped in its oilcloth, clutched in Otto's dead hand. The blood and grease smear was perfectly preserved, a thumbprint of murder as clear as the day it was made. Marshal Cobb sent it by express rider to the territorial capital for examination by a judge. Kells's body was pulled from the floodwaters a mile downstream, a bullet hole in his chest and water in his lungs. The coroner ruled death by gunshot and drowning. Rourke's body was found another quarter-mile beyond that, battered by rocks, lungs full of river water. Otto's body was recovered beside Rourke's, his hand still tangled in the Irishman's coat, the watch in his other hand. Dr. Marion Pike came to the mill with her medical bag and quiet competence. She cleaned Acacheta's various scrapes and bruises, including a nasty gash on his shoulder from the snag field, treated Giselle's bruised ribs and scratched face, gave them both willow bark tea for pain and exhaustion. She said nothing about the wild improbability of their survival, just worked with the pragmatism of a frontier doctor who'd seen everything twice and been surprised by none of it. That night they stayed in the mill too exhausted to travel farther. Acacheta built a fire on the stone floor of the second level, well away from the water damage. They sat close to its warmth, wrapped in blankets Marion had brought, and tried to process what had happened. "What happens now?" Giselle asked, staring into the flames. "The law will sort itself," Acacheta said. "Burdock will be tried, probably sent to prison. Rourke's property will be seized, his debts examined. Many of his contracts will be thrown out as fraudulent." He paused. "Your father's mortgage was almost certainly illegal. Rourke had a habit of charging usurious interest, forging documents. You will likely get your land free and clear." Giselle thought about the 12 acres and timber house, her mother's dowry property, though she'd never thought of it that way. Otto's last words echoed in her mind. "Look for the deed, Giselle. The dowry deed. It will save you." "I don't know if I can live there," she said quietly. "In the house where Papa and I, before everything fell apart." "You do not have to decide tonight. Or tomorrow. Give yourself time to grieve first." They sat in silence. Giselle was aware of Acacheta beside her, the solid warmth of his presence, the way his breathing had synced with hers without either of them noticing. This man who'd saved her life, carried her for miles, taught her to shoot, fought beside her. This stranger who'd become the most important person in her world in the span of a single day. "What about you?" she asked. "What will you do now?" Acacheta stared into the fire, his face thoughtful. "I have been alone for 3 years. I thought I would be alone forever." He glanced at her. "But now I am not sure I want to be alone anymore." "Because you feel responsible for me?" "No. Because you are strong. Because you fought when you could have surrendered. Because you trusted me when every reasonable instinct said not to. Because somewhere in the chaos of today, I stopped being an exile just surviving and started being—" He struggled for words. "Started being a man with something worth staying for." Giselle's heart did something complicated in her chest. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Of what?" "That this is just adrenaline talking. That when the danger passes and life gets ordinary, you'll realize you don't want to be tied to a crippled woman for the rest of your life. That you'll leave." Acacheta turned to face her fully, his dark eyes serious. "Listen to me carefully. I have been in exile for 3 years. I have been alone. I know what alone feels like. It feels like drowning slowly every day. A little more water in your lungs until you forget what breathing freely was like. You pulled me out of that water as surely as I pulled you from the river. You gave me a reason to stop just surviving and start living again. He reached out, took her hand in both of his. His palms were calloused, warm, solid. That is not adrenaline. That is... He leaned forward and kissed her. It was brief, tentative, a question more than a statement. When he pulled back, his eyes searched hers for an answer. That is what it is. He finished quietly. Giselle's free hand rose to touch his face, tracing the line of his jaw, the small scar on his cheekbone she'd noticed earlier. I think I'm falling in love with you, she said. Which is insane because we met this morning and I don't even know your favorite food or if you sing or what you dream about at night. But I am falling in love with you. I do not sing, Akacheta said seriously, and despite everything Giselle almost laughed. I dream about buffalo, which I have not seen in 4 years. And my favorite food is roasted duck with wild onions cooked until soft. His thumb brushed her cheekbone with infinite gentleness. And I think I am falling in love with you too, which is less insane than you think. When you face death together, you learn more about a person in hours than most people learn in years. I know you are brave. I know you do not quit. I know you can shoot straight when it matters. That is enough to build on. So what do? We live. We rebuild. We figure out how to exist in a world where Rourke is dead and we are not. We find this dowry deed your father spoke of. We make a life. He kissed her again, longer this time. And we do it together. Giselle kissed him back, her arms going around his neck, pulling him close. For the first time since her father's hands pushed her into death, she felt something other than fear or anger or grief. She felt hope. They broke apart eventually, foreheads pressed together, breathing in sync. Outside, the river murmured its eternal song, flowing toward morning. Inside, the fire crackled. 2 survivors holding each other in the darkness, planning a future neither had thought possible 12 hours earlier. Stay with me tonight, Giselle whispered. Just stay close. I don't want to be alone. You will never be alone again, Akacheta promised. Not while I live. They lay down together by the fire, wrapped in blankets, her back against his chest, his arm across her waist, safe, warm, together. And for the first time in days, maybe years, Giselle slept without nightmares. The legal aftermath took 2 weeks to fully resolve. Marshal Cobb was thorough, meticulous, determined to build cases that would stand up in territorial court and set precedents that would discourage future Rourkes. Sheriff Burdock was charged with corruption, complicity in murder, and criminal conspiracy. He pled guilty to all charges in exchange for testifying against Rourke's remaining associates. He was sentenced to 20 years in the territorial prison at hard labor. Morrow and the other surviving posse members were charged as accessories to attempted murder and assault. Most received prison terms of 5 to 10 years. Morrow, who'd been shot by Giselle and could barely walk even after Dr. Pike's treatment, was sentenced to 8 years. Rourke's financial records were seized and examined by a territorial accountant. The depth of his fraud was staggering: backdated surveys, forged land claims, usurious loans with interest rates that would make a Chicago banker blush, intimidation of witnesses, destruction of legal documents. Dozens of debts were thrown out as illegal. Otto's mortgage was among them. But there was a complication regarding ownership of the Valentin property. Otto had mortgaged it to Rourke, but the mortgage was fraudulent. So who owned the land now? Otto's estate, which meant Giselle, or was it seized as part of Rourke's criminal enterprise? The answer came from an unexpected source. 1 week after the mill siege, a traveling notary arrived in Copper Gulch from Denver. He was an elderly Czech man named Dvorak, who'd been hired by Otto 3 months earlier, before the ferry incident, before Petrie's murder, before everything went to hell. Notary Dvorak had a leather portfolio. Inside was a property deed, dated May 14th, 1862. 13 years earlier, registered with the Territorial Land Office when it was still operating out of a tent. The deed was written in both Czech and English, bearing official territorial seals and multiple witness signatures. It was elegant, formal, legally bulletproof. This land hereby granted to Anna Kovar, the document read in both languages, as dowry property in accordance with Bohemian inheritance, custom, and tradition, to remain in her name and her direct female descendants' possession. In recorded by the territorial clerk and recognized as customary practice, free from spousal debts, liens, or claims arising from marriage. Said property to pass matrilineally to daughters or female heirs according to traditional law, protected and recognized by territorial statute as binding upon all parties. Giselle read it 3 times, her hands shaking, not quite believing what she was seeing. Notary Dvorak explained patiently, in Czech-accented English. Your mother brought this land to her marriage as dowry. Under Bohemian custom, which the territorial government recognizes for immigrant communities maintaining traditional practices, dowry property remains in the wife's name, completely separate from the husband's estate and creditors. It cannot be used to secure his debts without her explicit, written consent, properly witnessed. But my mother died 3 years ago, which means the property passed to you automatically as her daughter and sole heir. Under the matrilineal provision, it goes from mother to daughter, bypassing the husband entirely. Your father had no legal right to mortgage it. Any document he signed purporting to do so was void from the moment of signing. Rourke's mortgage was legally worthless from the very beginning. Giselle sat in stunned silence in Dr. Pike's surgery, where they'd gathered for this meeting. Akacheta stood behind her chair, one hand resting on her shoulder. Otto knew about this. Notary Dvorak continued pulling out more papers, or at least suspected. That is why he hired me 3 months ago to research whether the dowry protection still held after Anna's death and whether Rourke's mortgage had any legal standing. I confirmed it did not and sent him a detailed letter with copies of the original deed and relevant statutes. He received my letter on April 15th, 8 days before the ferry incident. So Otto had known that Rourke's threats about the mortgage were empty, known that even if the debt wasn't paid, the land couldn't be seized because it was Giselle's by right of inheritance, completely separate from his obligations. He'd still tried to drown her. Fear had blinded him, that completely overridden even the knowledge that would have freed them both. But at the very end, drowning himself and Rourke in the mill pond flood, he'd remembered. He'd shouted to her about the deed. He'd sacrificed himself to stop Rourke and deliver both the murder evidence and the knowledge that would secure her future. Giselle didn't know whether to laugh or weep. Her father had been a coward and a hero, a broken man who'd found his spine too late. She'd never forgive the push the hands that shoved her toward death. But maybe she could forgive the man who'd spent his last breath trying to protect her. There is one more thing, Notary Dvorak said, producing a final document. Your father paid my fee in advance and left instructions. If anything happened to him, I was to deliver this to you personally. He handed Giselle a sealed envelope, cheap paper with her name written in Otto's careful hand. Giselle opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a single sheet covered in Otto's writing, Czech and English, mixed together the way he'd always done when emotion overwhelmed his adopted language. Cherushko, if you are reading this, I am dead. Probably by my own foolishness or cowardice. You should know some things. I tried to drown you because I was afraid. Rourke said he would take everything, the land, the house, everything your mother and I built. He said you would die anyway, that Kells would kill you quietly, and I would lose you and the land both. But if I did it myself quick and clean, the land would be saved. I believed him because I wanted to believe him. Because I am weak. But you are not weak. You have your mother's strength. Anna always said you would be stronger than both of us, and she was right. You survived fever that should have killed you. You learned to live in a body that betrayed you. You never gave up, never stopped fighting. I admire you more than you know. The land is yours. It was always yours from the moment Anna died. I could not touch it legally, and neither can Rourke. Notary Dvorak has proof. Use it. Build a life. Be free. I know you cannot forgive me for the ferry. I do not ask you to. I only ask that you remember I loved you even when fear made me a monster. Your mother would be proud of who you have become. I am proud of who you are becoming. Live well, Jerushko. That is my last wish. Your father, Otto. The letter was dated April 20th, 3 days before the ferry incident. He'd known what he was going to do. He'd written this before Rourke ever gave the final order, preparing for the moment when cowardice would overwhelm love. Giselle folded the letter carefully, her vision blurred. Akacheta's hand squeezed her shoulder gently. He loved you, Akacheta said quietly. In the end, that is what you must remember. Not the fear, but the love that existed before fear ate him, and the courage he found at the very end. Giselle nodded, not trusting her voice. The grief was complicated, painful, shot through with anger and loss and a forgiveness she hadn't expected to feel. But underneath it all was relief. The land was hers, legally, incontestably hers. She had a foundation to build on. Spring turned to summer. Copper Gulch began to heal. Giselle made a decision about the property after much thought and long discussions with Akacheta. She couldn't live in the timber house where Otto had raised her. Too many ghosts, too many memories of the man he'd been before fear hollowed him out. Instead, she hired Thomas Red and several townsmen to build a new cabin on the river side of the property on a level lot with good drainage and a view of the water. They built it to her specifications. Wide doorways to accommodate a wheeled chair, not Otto's barrel stave contraption, which had finally broken beyond repair, but the chair she still used while awaiting something better. A ramp instead of front steps. Smooth plank floors with no lips or thresholds. A covered porch where she could sit and watch the river. 2 rooms, a main living space with a stone fireplace and a smaller bedroom. Akacheta helped with the building, working alongside the townsmen. He also designed and built a dock that extended from the property into the river. He constructed it solid with railings so Giselle could pull herself along independently, and a platform at the end where his canoe, recovered from the snag field and repaired, could be launched. During this period, Dr. Marion Pike made a suggestion that would change everything. I've been corresponding with a medical colleague in Denver, Marion said one evening as she checked Giselle's healing ribs. Dr. Hermann Schultz, he's German, trained in Berlin, specializes in mobility devices for injured soldiers. He's designed a new type of invalid chair that's far superior to anything available here. It's expensive, but... How expensive? Giselle asked. $40? Plus shipping. $40 was a fortune, 2 months' wages for a working man. But Giselle had been saving money for years from bookkeeping work she did for local businesses, carefully hoarding every penny against an uncertain future. She had $53 in a tin box under her bed. "Tell me about this chair," she said. Marion showed her a technical drawing. Dr. Schultz had sent a wheeled chair with a frame of bent steel tubing seat and back made of leather, stretched over a frame and an ingenious wheel design. The rear wheels were large, 24 inches in diameter, with iron rims wrapped in solid India rubber for smooth rolling, Each wheel had a smaller iron hand ring mounted outside it, allowing the user to propel themselves by gripping the iron hand rings and pushing. The front wheels were small casters that could swivel. Well-oiled bronze bushing hubs made the wheels turn with minimal friction. It looked like something from the future compared to Otto's rough carpentry. "I want it," Giselle said without hesitation. "Are you certain $40 is?" "I'm certain. Order it. I'll have the money ready." The chair arrived 7 weeks later, shipped by freight wagon from Denver, packed in a wooden crate stuffed with straw. Akacheta assembled it on the new cabin's porch, while Giselle watched from her old chair, her heart beating fast with hope and fear in equal measure. When he finished, he helped her transfer into it. The leather seat was comfortable padded. The footrests were adjustable, holding her legs at the right angle. Giselle gripped the iron hand rings, smooth iron hoops that her palms fit perfectly, and pushed. The chair rolled forward with a smoothness that shocked her. No rattling, no fighting against rough wheels, just clean, efficient motion. "Oh," she breathed. "Oh, by thunder." She rolled across the porch, down the ramp across the packed earth to the dock. The solid rubber-wrapped wheels handled the rough ground far better than Otto's iron rims ever had. She could maneuver with precision, could turn in place, could move at speeds she'd never managed before. For the first time in 5 years, she had true, independent mobility. Giselle rolled to the end of the dock and stopped looking out at the river that had nearly killed her and had given her Akasheta. Tears streamed down her face, not grief this time, but joy. Akacheta walked down the dock to stand beside her. He said nothing, just rested his hand on her shoulder while she processed what this chair meant. Freedom, independence, choice. "Thank you," she said finally. "I did nothing but assemble it. You stayed. That's everything." That night, Akacheta built a fire in the yard, and they practiced a new skill together, shooting from the wheelchair. Its iron rings and bushings fitted by the settlement's blacksmith Giselle learned to brace the revolver on the chair's armrest for extra stability. Found she could hit targets accurately at 30 paces now. Akacheta watched with approval, occasionally offering corrections to her stance or aim. "Why are you teaching me this?" Giselle asked as she reloaded. "Because you said you wanted to defend yourself, to not be cargo." Akacheta added wood to the fire. "And because if we are going to live out here, no close neighbors far from town, you need to be able to protect the cabin when I am checking trap lines or hunting. A gun is no use if you cannot shoot it well." "Wait," Giselle's hand stilled on the revolver. "You're planning to stay?" Akacheta met her eyes across the fire. "If you want me to." "I want you to. But I need to know this isn't pity, that you're not staying because you feel sorry for—" "It is not pity." Akacheta's voice was firm. "It is respect and gratitude. And—" he paused, searching for words. "And love. I love you, Giselle. I have loved you since you shot Morrow to protect our flank at the mill. Maybe even before that. And I want to stay, not because you need me, but because I need you. Because you make me want to be the man I thought I had lost. Do you understand?" Giselle felt tears sting her eyes again. "I love you too. I have since I don't even know when. Maybe since you pulled me from the river. Maybe since you taught me to shoot in your camp. Definitely since you carried me through the snag field and refused to give up." She rolled her chair closer to the fire, closer to him. "But I'm scared. What if I can't give you everything a partner should? What if—" "Stop." Akacheta moved to kneel in front of her wheelchair. Its iron rings and bushings fitted by the settlement's blacksmith, he took both her hands in his. "You are giving me everything that matters. Companionship, trust, purpose, love. The rest He shrugged. The rest we will figure out as we go. Yes, yes, Giselle whispered. He kissed her then deep and sure, and Giselle wrapped her arms around his neck and held on tight, feeling the future open before them, like the river flowing toward morning. When they broke apart, Akacheta rested his forehead against hers. I want to marry you. Not under white man's law, they will not allow it, a Lakota and a white woman. But under my people's way, a commitment witnessed by community. Will you have me as your husband in all the ways that matter? Yes. Yes, absolutely yes. They were married 3 days later. In a ceremony, Dr. Marion Pike officiated with Thomas Red standing as witness. The blacksmith and his wife attended, as did the widow of Elias Boone, who died helping them. It was a small group, but that seemed right. They were building something new. Akacheta spoke vows in Lakota, which Giselle didn't understand, but felt in her bones promises that needed no translation. She spoke hers in English, simple and direct, from the heart. I promise to stand beside you, or sit in my case in all things. To trust you, to fight for you, to build this life with you. To be your partner in all ways. For as long as we both live. Marion wrapped their joined hands with a strip of cloth. By the authority vested in me as the only medical professional within 50 miles, and because I say so, I pronounce you bound together. Kiss your wife, Akacheta. He did, and the small group cheered. They settled into a rhythm of life that was hard but deeply satisfying. Giselle took on bookkeeping contracts from ranches and businesses across the territory, work she could do from the cabin using her skill with numbers and clear handwriting. She charged fair rates and built a reputation for accuracy and discretion. Within 3 months, she had more work than she could handle. Akacheta returned to trapping running lines along the river, selling pelts to traders who came through Copper Gulch monthly. He also hunted, bringing back deer and rabbit and wild turkey that Giselle learned to cook over the cabin's fireplace. Between his income and hers, they managed to build a small cushion against hard times. He taught her more about shooting, and she practiced from her wheelchair until she could hit targets consistently at 40 paces with the revolver 60, with a rifle he bought her. Its iron rings and bushings fitted by the settlement's blacksmith. He also taught her to paddle the canoe from a seated position, bracing herself with wedges he'd carved specifically for her, compensating for her lack of leg strength with powerful arm strokes. She taught him to read and write English beyond basic recognition. He could speak it reasonably well, but had never learned letters. They worked through a primer Thomas Red loaned them, Akacheta painstaking, and determined his large, calloused fingers carefully forming letters on slate. Within 4 months, he could read simple contracts and write his name in English. They built a life measured in small triumphs and shared work in morning coffee on the porch and evening fires by the river. It wasn't easy, poverty rarely is, and prejudice from some townspeople who didn't approve of their mixed marriage was an ongoing thorn. But it was theirs, built on trust, earned through survival, and sustained by love, forged in crisis. One evening, in late August, nearly 4 months after the mill siege, a rider appeared at their cabin. He was Lakota, wearing a mix of traditional and settler clothing, his hair in braids wrapped with red cloth. Akacheta stepped onto the porch, his hand moving automatically to the rifle leaning near the door. But the rider raised both hands, palm out in the universal gesture of peace. I come as a friend, brother. I am Mato of the Sikangu band. I have a message from the elders. Akacheta's face went carefully blank. What message? Mato dismounted, approached slowly, and Giselle got her first good look at him. He was older than Akacheta, maybe 40, with a scar across his left cheek and eyes that had seen hard things. We heard about what happened in Copper Gulch, Mato said in English, probably for Giselle's benefit. About how you fought beside a white woman, against corrupt white men. How you saved her life multiple times, protected her, married her in the old way. He paused significantly. The elders asked me to tell you something important. The story of your exile was told wrong among the whites. They thought you betrayed the people in the raid 3 years ago. Lakota stood very still. I killed my cousin. You killed a man who had forgotten what it means to be a warrior. A warrior protects the weak, Lakota. You remembered that. You refused to kill children. Mato's voice softened. What the whites never knew, what even some of our people did not see, was that you rode into the burning wagon and pulled 5 children out of the flames. You saved 5 white children at great risk to yourself. That is not betrayal. That is courage. Lakota said nothing, but Giselle saw his hands tighten on the porch railing. The elders say you are welcome to return whenever you wish. Mato continued. Your exile is lifted. You are Sikangu again. You are our brother again. Silence stretched, broken only by the river's murmur and the evening song of birds. Giselle held her breath, watching Lakota's face, wondering what he would choose. Finally, Lakota spoke. Thank you. Tell the elders I am deeply honored, but I will not be returning. My home is here now. He glanced back at Giselle, and something in his expression softened. I have a wife, a life, responsibilities. I am no longer the angry young warrior who left 3 years ago. I am someone different now. Someone better, I think. Mato nodded slowly, unsurprised. The elders thought you would say that. They said to tell you this live well. Honor your wife. Raise children if the spirits bless you with them. That is how you honor the people, by living with integrity. You do not need to live among us to be one of us. He remounted his horse, raised his hand in farewell, and rode away into the gathering dusk. Lakota stood on the porch for a long time, staring after him. Giselle rolled her chair beside him and took his hand. Are you sure? She asked quietly. You could go back, be with your people again. You are my people now, Lakota said, turning to face her. This cabin, this life, that is where I belong, I am sure. Giselle squeezed his hand. I love you. I love you too. He pulled her up from the chair into his arms, holding her close. Now come inside. I will make stew, and you will complain it needs more salt like you always do, and we will argue about whether the accounts balance, and then we will go to bed. Like married people do. Giselle laughed, the sound bright and clear and utterly free, echoing across the water. That sounds absolutely perfect. They went inside together, and the cabin door closed behind them, shutting out the world and closing them into the life they'd built together, from blood and sacrifice and stubborn hope. 2 years later, on a warm afternoon in May of 1877, a visitor arrived at the cabin. He was old, bent with age, wearing the dusty black coat of a traveling circuit judge. Are you Giselle Valentin? He asked, consulting a document. Giselle's standing with warriors now. She corrected from her position on the porch, the fancy Denver wheelchair gleaming in the sunlight, its iron rings and bushings fitted by the settlement's blacksmith. What can I do for you, Judge? The judge removed his hat respectfully. I'm Judge Harlan Pierce, Territorial Circuit. I've been settling the last remnants of Clancy Rourke's estate. This concerns you directly. He produced a thick envelope. May I? Please. Giselle gestured to the chair beside hers. Lakota appeared in the doorway, alerted by voices, and stood watchfully. Judge Pierce settled into the chair with a grateful sigh and opened the envelope. Rourke's assets were seized by the territory and sold at auction to compensate his victims. After all legitimate debts were paid and criminal fines assessed, there remained a surplus of $317. You were listed as a primary victim of his criminal conspiracy, attempted murder fraud, intimidation, emotional distress. By order of the territorial court, this compensation is yours. He produced a bank draft. If you'll sign the receipt, the money is yours immediately. $317. A small fortune. Enough to expand the cabin by livestock put away for true hard times. Giselle signed the receipt with shaking hands, and Judge Pierce handed her the draft. "There's one more thing," the judge said, consulting his papers. A letter was found among Rourke's effects, actually hidden wrapped in oilcloth and buried in his strongbox. It appears to be from a territorial marshal dated 3 months before the ferry incident. With your permission, I'd like to read it. Go ahead. Giselle said, her curiosity piqued. Judge Pierce adjusted his spectacles and read, "Mr. Rourke, this office has received serious allegations regarding fraudulent land claims, usurious lending practices, and possible witness intimidation in Copper Gulch and surrounding territories. We have been contacted by one Otto Valentine regarding potential criminal activity. An investigation will commence within 60 days. We request your full cooperation. Failure to cooperate will result in seizure of all financial records and possible criminal charges. Signed, Marshal Theodore Watts, Territorial Office." Giselle's breath caught. "Papa contacted the marshal before everything?" "It appears so," Judge Pierce said gently. "The letter is dated January 12, 1875, 3 months before the ferry incident. Your father was trying to stop Rourke through legal means. Unfortunately, Marshal Watts died of pneumonia in February, before he could follow up, and the investigation died with him. Rourke likely used this letter to pressure your father, to show him that his attempt to involve the law had failed and only made things worse. So Otto had tried to do the right thing first. Had gone to the law, asked for help. When the marshal died and the investigation evaporated, he'd been left exposed, a man who defied Rourke with nothing to show for it but danger. No wonder he'd broken when Rourke applied pressure about Petrie's murder. He'd already tried legal recourse and watched it fail. Fear must have seemed like the only reasonable response. "Thank you for telling me," Giselle said quietly. It helps to know he tried." Judge Pierce nodded, tucked away his papers, and stood to leave. "One last thing. The territorial governor has asked me to convey his personal gratitude. Your testimony helped expose corruption that extended beyond Copper Gulch. 2 other sheriffs and a county clerk have been removed from office. You struck a blow for justice, Mrs. Standing with Warriors. The territory is better for it." After Judge Pierce rode away, Giselle sat on the porch and stared at the bank draft, thinking about her father, about the complicated legacy of a man who'd tried to do right, failed broken under pressure, and then sacrificed himself to fix what he'd destroyed. Akacheta sat beside her, waiting patiently for her to process. "He tried," Giselle said finally. "Before fear ate him, he tried to stop Rourke the right way." "Yes, that matters. Does it change anything?" "It changes how you remember him," Akacheta said thoughtfully. "Not the push that was real and terrible. But now you know the push came after he had tried every other option and watched them fail. It does not excuse what he did, but it explains it. And maybe that brings you peace." Giselle thought about that. Maybe it does. A little. That evening, they discussed what to do with the compensation money. They decided to split it 3 ways. $100 went into savings against hard times. $100 went to Dr. Marion Pike's surgery as a donation. Marion had been treating Copper Gulch's poor for free, and her medicine stocks were running low. The remaining $117 went to Thomas Redd's school for book slates and supplies so children could learn to read. Rourke's blood money put to good use. Giselle said with satisfaction. Akacheta pulled her close, kissed the top of her head. Your father would be proud of that choice. Do you really think so? I know so. At his core, before fear hollowed him out, Otto was a good man who wanted good things. This honors that man, not the broken one who pushed you. Yes, he would be proud. They sat together as the sun set, watching the river turn gold, then red, then dark. Two survivors who'd built a life from the ruins of betrayal and violence. Two outcasts who'd found home in each other. It wasn't a perfect life. The winters were brutal. Money was always tight. Prejudice from some townspeople who didn't approve of their marriage was an ongoing wound. Giselle's paralysis meant daily challenges that never went away. But it was their life, built on trust, earned through survival, forged in crisis, sustained by love, that had been tested and proven true. They'd fought for it, bled for it, nearly died for it. And they'd won. The cabin stood solid behind them, lamplight glowing warm in the windows. The river flowed eternal before them, carrying away the past and bringing new tomorrows. Akacheta's hand found Giselle's, their fingers interlacing with the ease of long practice. They'd survived when survival seemed impossible. They'd built when building seemed futile. They'd loved when love seemed like the greatest risk of all. And now they had what they'd both been searching for without knowing, not just survival, but a future. Not just shelter, but a home. Not just existing together, but truly living together.